Welcome to the I-80 Club Plus One. Glad to have everyone with us again. I know Josh has done a lot of these plus ones with the football guys from Indiana and Oregon and all that stuff. And I wanted to do one, and we were talking about who should I do one with? Who should I do one with? Well, it's late October when we're talking. It's almost basketball season. We're doing way more with basketball this year in the I-80 Club. And of course, people kind of associate with me with Nebraska basketball, which is really what our next guest is associated with too. And as you can see, if you're watching on YouTube today, our next guest is the voice of Nebraska basketball, Kent Pavelka, getting ready for yet another season of Husker basketball here. Good afternoon, Kent. How are you doing? Thanks for joining us today.
Doing great, Jack. Great to be with you. You kind of own the Lincoln market as far as being the number one Husker basketball fan.
I do. Yeah, I know. You got the Omaha side, I got the Lincoln side, and maybe we got everything covered there.
I think we do. Yeah. And you said it's almost time for basketball season. It's here, man.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. It is. What's this time of year like for you as you're getting ready for the season?
Oh, last week it was interesting. The week before the first broadcast, actually, it all starts in the spring or early summer for me, is getting my head around what's going to happen, going down and watch practice as soon as they start practicing. And it just sneaks up on you. And now, really from now through hopefully late into March, it's a daily thing for me. Like we did the game against Grand Valley State, and on Monday, called their sports information guy, getting a spotting board for Texas Rio Grande for the season opener. This is from Sunday.
Yeah.
So anyway, the point is the day after every game, I start getting ready for the next one, and really it never ends till the end of March, because we've got a game the next day, which sometimes happens if you're in a tournament deal. You're working that night to get ready for the next morning. But if you got a game in 7 days, and this is an 8-day deal, I just use all the time available. And so it's just like nonstop prep, really.
And I think people don't know the prep that goes into it. What's your process look like? Are you just reading? You're just reading a lot? Are you watching video? What is your prep, especially now in 2024, look like?
Well, first thing I do is make a spotting board up by hand, which is kind of old fashioned, but apropos for an old guy, I guess. And that's and I work on the spotting board from like today through like next Monday, and eventually it ends up. I don't know if you can see this or not.
A little bit, yeah, I can. Like, and I've seen them before too when you've taken pictures. Yeah.
And then I've got an hour pregame show so I form. I write script for that. I formulate questions for that. I have it all typed out. I'm just, a kind of a, some guys don't do that.
I know. Right. I figured.
Some, show up, do the game, ad lib the questions to the coach. That's just not me. And so, I'm doing all that. And then I've got access to video of, online, and so I watch as much video as I can of the next game and the next game's opponent, so that I'm familiar with the names and numbers, and I hit the ground running when the game starts. So that's kind of it.
You get to see practices. I think you mentioned that. How often you get to do that, and how helpful is that for you in learning Nebraska?
Very helpful. Coach Hoiberg and really everybody that has been in that role there have always been very gracious and giving me access, and because I think they trust me, and so I go down. I think I saw 5 or 6 practices before this exhibition game. Once a week, not quite once a week. Once things get going real in earnest. But that helps me a lot. Yeah. I feel like I know the team by the time the first broadcast hits.
Yeah. We were just talking in kind of the waiting room here before, the virtual waiting room. You started your second section, your second time going through the gig of being Nebraska basketball play-by-play guy, the same time I started at KLIN almost exactly because I started on October 1st. And so that would have been
Wow.
right about a few weeks for the first exhibition game, I'm going to guess, that 2006 season.
Well, I think I did your not podcast, but your long form. What you
Yes.
call?
Yeah. That
What was
we
that?
did that a few years later, I
Was
think.
it a few years
Yeah.
later? Yeah.
And by the way, I would still look that up. It's under the Jack Mitchell podcast. We talk a lot of Kent and I got into a lot of football then. We
Yeah.
played some old clips. It was one of my favorite discussions. I think that was the last time I recorded something with you, other than maybe
Yeah.
being on my show a couple of times. But if you want to hear talk about the old football days, go back and listen to that because we did it all. You can still find it under the Jack Mitchell podcast. But it's interesting. So that's what. Well, I know it's 18 years ago. 18 years. And by the way, what 74 to 96 before that? So is this
Yeah.
year 40? Is that right?
No, it's year 50.
50.
No, well, here. People say what year is this? And I always have to explain. It's a little complicated. My first season doing Husker basketball was 50 years ago. Okay. But this is the season 38 for
74.
me. But for me personally, the fact that it was 50 years ago I started doing this is what is significant to me, because that's a milestone,
Yeah.
Who would have thought?
Yeah.
So but I think it's 38 seasons this year.
38 seasons this year.
Yeah.
Why do you still want to do it? I mean, and I'm not saying you shouldn't or anything. But listen, there's the prep that you talked about. There's all there's the windshield. You got a lot of windshield time, Kent, late at night. I know you do. You got a lot of stuff. Sometimes I say to myself, why am I getting up at 4:30 in the morning? And so I know those questions go through your head. Why do you still come back year after year?
Flying back from Rutgers or now from the West Coast, you land at the Lincoln Airport at 2 a.m. and have to drive to Omaha, and it's snowing and you're thinking, what am I doing? But it's kind of funny. Sunday went down for the game against Grand Valley State, and I'm thinking, well, it's going to be a grind here again. But as soon as I walked in the building, I'm good. I feel it again.
Yeah.
And I don't know. It's not so much that I crave doing the broadcasts as it is just being close to, just feeling like I'm part of it, in my own way. And I'll miss that when that's gone. But here I am, another year. We'll see about next year after this.
Yeah. It's interesting. I hear a lot of people. We were talking earlier too about how, I think people obviously associate you and to some degree me too with Nebraska basketball specifically. The basketball fandom in this state, I've never quite been able to put my finger on it. I'm curious if you can help me or at least discuss it with me, because even within the world of Husker sports fandom, football fandom, the fans of the football team, fans of the volleyball team, and there's a lot of overlap in there. But I guess there's something unique about the loyalty and the long timers. And I don't know what it is, but how do you describe and even compared to other maybe college basketball programs as well, like Blue Bloods, how do you think this fan base is unique? Because I see it, but I can't put my finger on it.
Well, obviously, a big part of it is and loyalty to the nth degree, born out of just being obstinate enough to stick with it, right? I mean, everybody knows they haven't won a game in the tournament. The only power conference team not to win a game in the tournament. I mean, we went 10 years without being there. So it's kind of similar in the old days when I was behind the mic for football, although they were very, very, very successful. But I think that the crowd and the fans were there partially for both sports, is like there's this collective, we're going to climb this mountain until we get to the top of it, damn it. And we as an aggregate, our fan base is unique in that way. I mean, we're going to, we are here again, and I think people, in being part of it. So And the other thing I would say to you, Jack, is that if there are a lot of people who want to, suggest that Nebraska's just been awful in basketball. That's not true. That is not true. If you go back and I got a list. I wish I had it handy of some big time names and big time coaches and big time programs that have walked into the old Nebraska Coliseum, Devaney Center, and PBA, and have walked out with their tail between their legs.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just that whole thing about not winning a game in the tournament is kind of colors everything else that you've done. But
Right.
it's been behind the mic for me to try to tell the story of it. There is that element that is hard to put into words, as you suggested, that has to do with we represent an energy factor that's here, and it never goes away. I mean, you can look at other teams and other programs where, inherent in your question is that, by comparison, the fan bases haven't been there year in
Right.
year.
You've been in dead arenas, I'm sure.
Yeah,
over the years, like a lot of them in the Big Ten, I'm sure.
Well, not so much in the Big Ten, but I'll say this: last year, for example, and you go back to 2014, their Purdue would be the only other arena that I would say is on par with Nebraska when it gets going.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, but Penn State can be just awful.
Yeah.
I've been to Maryland, and they don't necessarily fill it up, and a lot of that sometimes is because it's Nebraska, right?
Yeah, that's
I
true.
mean, I hate to say that, but it's true.
Mm-hmm.
Because we talk about Assembly Hall in Bloomington, Indiana, and the heritage of that program, and then you go in there and you think, well, this isn't such a tough place to play. Well, number one, the fans aren't jacked like they will be when Purdue's in there, and number two, they have a hard time getting into it when they're getting beat by Nebraska. So, and that's happened,
an odd amount, actually. Yeah.
So,
that's true.
There's a lot of angles to it. I don't know if I've done any better job than you can describing what I think you're alluding to.
No, it's just, I mean, I don't know. There's just, you don't go into that building too often, even when things haven't been good in terms of long term, but you don't go into that building. You were talking about walking in there where it doesn't feel like a program a fan base that has been completely beaten down in terms of how that building feels. And that always I mean, even games, I remember, Kent, there was a Purdue game when the season wasn't going well. Oh, this must have been 2018, or maybe it was Miles last season, or I can't remember. But it was a blizzard. It was one of those terrible games on a Saturday, and the place was like 2/3 full, and they were having a bad season. I'm like, and I'm there, so I'm asking myself, but like, why are we all here? Why are we all here? And I don't even have the answer. I should ask myself with it.
Well, I'm with you. I don't think I have it either, but I think there are a lot of subtleties to it, and but isn't it great? Isn't it just great?
Yeah.
To be part of it.
I think the thing for me is, and I'm curious what you think about this, is I compare it to a football season. Like, you'll go through a football season when things aren't going very well, the last several years, where there's never really even a moment, a game, a day of just full unexpected joy, where it's just a celebratory day. But you can pretty much count every basketball season, Kent, no matter how bad things are, there's one or two or maybe three or maybe more days where out of nowhere, when you least expected it, you're going to get a shocking upset, or you're going to get a buzzer beater, and you're going to be celebrating, and we're going to be listening to post game and rewatching that game the minute we get home. It seems to happen everywhere, and it's just that little dangling of that bait right in front of you every year that you're going to get that. I think that's what is part of it too.
Yeah, I do too. And your comparison to the football atmosphere, I haven't been in the football stadium forever, but back in the day, someone was asking me the other day, about Nebraska basketball, and can't remember if it was about a road game or the tournament, or in Memphis, what it was like. And I said I likened it to a Nebraska football road game in the mid '90s. That all the fans there, and it just this indescribable collegiality that you think Nebraska owns. But maybe other programs have the same thing. And I mean, we just can't relate to the other programs with that kind of backing and spirit. But last year you knock off 2 top 10 teams, 2 court storms, and even like you say, even if and now I don't know what you were saying, but well before the end of the year, I had Nebraska as a lock in the tournament. I mean, how where is that?
Yeah,
to be talking about Nebraska's no way they're going to leave them out, and so you got that going for you once in a while, every 10 years, right?
Hopefully not.
Yeah, hopefully this year they win a game. They can get back and win a game, and I think if they can get in, they're going to be better equipped to win a game in the tournament.
Interesting. Why do you say that?
Well, because I think overall they've got a stronger roster than last year. And maybe it'll be a team that will be maybe not as successful one-loss wise, but I mean, if you finish in the top 10 in the conference, you're going to go to the tournament. That's why I say if you get in, I think you can win. They got 2 point guards, they got 2 centers, they're long, they're deep, they're plenty talented. And last year, you had a couple of guards that couldn't guard. At the end of the year, Rink Mast was, hobbling up and down on one leg, and
that's true.
To a degree, right at the end, it was, especially in Memphis, it was like, it's no wonder they had problems with Texas A&M. But I just think that potentially they could be a better team than last year. Again, maybe not win as many games, but they'll be better equipped to win one.
Interesting. I want to get more into this year's team, but I want to ask you a question still about last year again. When last season ended, oh God, that was a rough night for all of us. Though when it went down, even if we should have seen it coming, it was, and it started out looking pretty good, and then it was just such a painful way to lose. And it felt like it was predestined that it was going to happen, and it wasn't. And then to see, I mean, man, it about did it to me when they put that shot of Keisei Tominaga on TV, and he's in tears, and I couldn't do it, man. It killed me. And I think in that moment, I thought, listen, they may have success, everything will be great, but there was just something about last season. And I'll have to be honest, it was Keisei Tominaga being there and just the spectacle that he was last year. And I'm sure there's a little bit of a recency, and you start to endear other teams, newer teams get endeared to you eventually. But there was just something you didn't know what was going to happen with him that I don't know that you'll ever quite duplicate being a fan of a team.
Well, yeah. And, he was a showman, who I got a snapshot here somewhere of him coming down the floor after hitting a 3, turned around, ran toward us on the toward the other goal. And he's doing this. It looks like, to me, I mean, it looks like we're having eye contact. I mean, he played to the crowd, man. Nobody has been any better at that. And they loved him. And that's one thing I think that is yet to be defined, and whether or not that role will be picked up to any degree comparatively, I don't know. Maybe not. I don't know who that is on this year's team. Might be Berke Buchengel, maybe, because I can see a little bit of part of his personality that might special connection with the crowd.
Let's go through, because there's a bunch of people listening. I mean, and me included. See, I watched the exhibition game. That's really all I've been able to see. And we've got, I don't know what, like 8, 9 players that people have never seen before. So let me just kind of go through them, name them, and then have you just give me any thoughts that you've got. You've seen them a little bit in practice. You've seen them in the game. You've been studying up on them too, just maybe as introductory for some of the people who aren't familiar to give them an idea what they're going to see. I want to start with the point guard transfer from Utah, Raleigh Worcester. I was impressed with him Sunday night, but I'm curious your thoughts on him.
Well, big, long, he's 6'4", 210 pounds, experienced, and just so savvy, basketball IQ, an overworked term, but I mean, as a point guard, he does exactly what you need him to do, and he's got the physical tools to do that. And if you want Keisei Tominaga, he's not your guy, because his thing is going to be orchestrating what happens up and down the floor, defense, all the little things, assists. And then if he scores 10 points, there's a bonus. So that's going to be him. And I think that he's totally equipped to be an effective point guard in the Big Ten Conference.
Do you buy into this idea that you hear from a lot of people that Nebraska has just so rarely had a true point guard over, I don't know, maybe going back to Glenn Watson, even just that kind of distributor? Do you buy into that? And if so, is Raleigh that kind of guy that we've been talking about?
I think so. I think he is. I mean, again, didn't have one last year, and Bryce Williams ended up being the point guard, and pretty good one actually. But he have two legitimate point guards with Worcester and Aaron Eulis. And then Williams can play it, and Sam Hoiberg can play it a little bit. So you can't say they don't have a true point guard this year.
Yeah. Give me since you mentioned Eulis, give me your thoughts on what you've seen from him so far.
Smaller than Worcester, about 6'3", 190. Doesn't look 190 to me. This will be his last year of eligibility, and everybody knows the story about the Iowa gambling thing, and he had to sit out last year. Probably the quickest guy down the floor on the team. Certainly, I think a little quicker than Worcester is, pushing it. Probably very good at taking the ball to the rim. Probably not as good a defender as Worcester, and neither one of them are, just knock down dead 3-point shooters. But I like him, and I think there's a complementary factor between the two of them in terms of style. If you're playing a team that has two quick point guards, those guys could play together. So I mean, and I think that's emblematic of the whole team, in that they each represent a style and a set of skills that you need to have on the shelf to pull into a game, or the talents of the team you're playing.
Yeah, for sure. And Worcester, a great turnover, really low on turnovers. Again, I know on that little bit, but that's going to be another thing. I think that'll be important for him too. When the game started, when I was watching on Sunday night, Kent, I hadn't seen. I mean, I had seen some videos, some pictures of Braxton Mia, but to see how big he was, not in person, but on the TV screen, and for you in person, it took me back. It's been a while since Nebraska's had a guy that towered over people like that. Tell me a little bit about him.
Wait till you're there, Jack.
Yeah, yeah.
He is a big human being. I've said all summer long, when people have asked about him, I've said he's Nebraska's version of a Purdue center, right?
I thought that same thing when I saw him.
I don't know. I think that probably he needs to be able to get up and down the floor a little better than he does. It might be a little conditioning issue, but he's going to. I mean, I'll tell you, people talk about him being a rim protector and a lob threat. The thing that impresses me the most about him is you aren't going to get around his screen. You know what I mean? I mean, he's going to get guys shots because his body, if you're a good defender, you can't go over the top against him. So he's going to provide a lot of guys some good 3-point looks. But I know they're excited about him, and I think that he's going to develop here as the season progresses. And I think he's developed in fall camp too. But Yeah, we haven't had one that size for a long, long time.
Yeah.
Sergei Vustovic, is that what his name was?
I think so.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And that was back in 2018 or something. But
Yeah.
and he didn't play. But
Right. Right. You got
so
to go
you
back
got
to
him and you got Andrew Morgan. You got
yeah.
two legit fives, and then Buchtengel will play a lot of five too.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's do those two guys. We'll start with Andrew Morgan. I keep hearing people who have seen him say he's more athletic than you expect. I'm not totally sure what that means, but I'm curious what you've seen from him.
Well, when I first looked at videotape of him in North Dakota, I thought rink mast right away, because that's kind of how he was utilized. I mean, they bring him up to the elbow with his back to it and run offense through him. Him finding cutters and whatnot, and he's good at that. And he can step out and shoot a three, a perimeter shot, not as well as rink mast. Might be have more physicality, probably has more physicality than rink, and will be more valuable on the block and rebounding the ball. So you got two guys to go with there. I don't know that you ever play Morgan and Mia together. Mm-hmm. But that's just an example, an idea. You've got a lot of ways to go with. You can go big along the front line with theoretically those three with Berke, and I just am so excited about the various ways they can play this year, and those two post guys are going to be a big part of that.
Yeah, and then Berke is a big guy, but I mean a really different profile, I presume, than those two guys. A little bit more of a score. I mean, they had him bringing down the ball on Sunday, which I know they've done with Derek Walker and Rank in the past, but a very different big, I think it sounds like, than those two guys.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I think people think he can play on the next level, as he can bring the ball up the floor. He's, and Fred has said that's probably the most impressive thing about him is his ability to handle the ball. And he's got all the ball skills. For my money at this point, I think that where he can improve is with his perimeter shot. But he too, Jack, is going to, when you get a look at him in person, he is thicker than you think.
Yeah, well, he was when I saw him on TV. I agree. First thing, that's not what I imagined. Skinnier.
Yeah.
European. I say European type player, but you know what I mean. Like, I don't know. I expected something different. A guy who looked more like a shooter.
Well, he looks. I mean, he looks the part of an NBA player.
Yeah.
An NBA big.
He's a big dude. Yeah. He's way thicker than I thought.
So. Yeah. So there's your front line. You got three guys that can play right there, and then you can play. You can play Jawan in there if you have to. He played there last year a few times.
That's true.
Yeah,
that's true. How about let's see, who have Griffiths, the Rutgers transfer, who I remember, by the way, sitting right behind you last winter at a game. I saw knocking down threes against Nebraska and being really annoyed with him at that point.
And
now he's on the team.
He did the same thing to us in Piscataway. I mean, he came in the game, and who is this guy with those?
Right.
He's the guy that went to Washington with the goggles, but he came in and I think he had 10 points in that game against us too. But he's a knockdown dead-eye 3-point shooter along with Esijan. He shot really well in the exhibition against Grand Valley State on Sunday. Esijan not so much. But here's the thing. We're going to end up talking about all these guys, and then we're going to look at this and say, well, we've talked about 11 guys here. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, there's a rotation. There's a rotation issue that has to be addressed, right?
Exactly.
I mean, somebody's not going to play.
For sure. Yeah, for sure. And we won't even talk about probably as well. We'll hit them Williams and Gary too. We're obviously the centerpiece of everything. Sam Hoiberg didn't play Sunday night, and he'll be in the mix too. Is Esijan obviously a shooter, right? There's a shooter. We've seen him again, another player that had a really good day against Nebraska last year. I believe when they were up in Madison, he had a really good day.
I think he had 12 points off the bench, hit 3 or 4 threes, and really, I mean, sealed the deal for him early in the game. He's he's a really interesting guy. I think potentially when he gets it going, people are going to forget about Casey, at least for the moment, because he's got the ability to do that in a game, the same kind of thing.
Yep.
He had 69 threes under Greg Gard at Wisconsin as a freshman. Now think about hitting 69 threes in that system.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, this is a perfect environment for him, perfect system for him. I know that they're really happy with the way he's developed in over the summer and in the fall in terms of the way, he's come along defensively and never makes a mistake. So it's not that he's totally, that's the only thing he does is shoot threes. He's better as a defender than he was when he came here. So I think he's more of an all-around player than people give him credit for.
So it'll be an upgrade from Casey in a defense spot at least then.
Well, yeah, and I think you've got a backcourt that is not going to hurt you defensively. I mean, CJ was not the most willing defender.
Yep.
So you're not going to have to help the guards as much as you had to help them last year defensively. Yeah. And again,
that'll be big. That'll be big. Yeah.
Yeah, it will be big. I mean, people don't come to see that, but that's where you win games on the defensive end.
Kent, you think of the end of the year, you think that Illinois game in the Big Ten tournament, right? And what you that perimeter defense hurt you, and not having a rim protector hurt you, particularly in that game when Shannon just completely goes off, and it was getting around guys and no rim protector there.
Right,
so in theory, the defense is better set against that kind of a threat this year.
Yeah, I think that really good guard combos are not going to have just a direct line opportunity to go to the rim against this team, because the guards will be better defenders, and there'll be if Mia's in the ball game, they had Rink and they had Alec last year. But I think they're going to be better defensively for both those reasons, in the backcourt and in the post.
By the end, though, Rink, and I can't wait to see him back, he wasn't a rim protector by the end.
No.
Right? He just was. I mean, he kind of isn't as was, but with whatever was going on with his health, he just wasn't a threat to be a rim protector.
No, he's a stretch four, and he's a really good one. But he's not a back to the basket 5-man that, and that you can, lob the ball and then he's gonna stop you from dunking it.
Yeah. Janowski, Frager, do you think we're gonna see much of these guys? I know they're youngsters and then probably a lot more in the future. What do you think of them, and will we see them?
Okay, so we've talked about Ulis, Williams, Morgan. We haven't talked about Buchtengill yet, have we?
Oh yeah, Bearcat. We did Bearcat. Yep,
a little bit. Yeah, we did. Jawan, Wooster, Asijan, Sam. That's 9. Is that 9 players? And Mia. That's 9 players there. So now you're talking about Griffiths is 10.
Yeah.
And now the freshmen make 12.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean,
there's so many minutes, right?
Huh?
Yeah. There's only so many minutes. Yeah.
Yeah. And the other thing is, even if you try to go 8 deep, certainly if you go 9 deep, this is just my opinion, I think you end up really being the best basketball team when you got 7 guys that are getting most of the minutes, and the 8th guy gets decent minutes. But, like Sunday, there were so many guys playing. This team has yet to establish an identity, a personality. Think about last year's team. That team had it.
Mm-hmm.
And that was because they had that nucleus of players, and so and you knew how they were going to play and what you could expect to see, and I don't know that you can do that with 10 guys, let alone 11 or 12. You can't do it with 11 or 12. And I think that you'll see him. I think you'll see Fred play 10 guys early in the rotation, trying to find out who the odd man out is. But of course, injuries can all of a sudden what we're talking about right now goes right out the window, and all these things are fixed because of things like that.
Yeah, and the depth is good. which will be helpful. Well, the other thing about what you're saying too is I'm assuming there are going to be times when Bryce is such a primary scoring option that you're gonna have a hard time wanting to get him off the court, right? He'll have to be out a little bit, but you're gonna want to get him as many minutes as you can in a lot of these games, I'm gonna guess.
Absolutely. I think that to some extent this will be a better team when we see them deferring to him a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And I don't know that it's in his personality to be the guy.
Right.
I think he is a guy, but I don't know if he's got to play like that this year. And he's got, to me, I've said all along, if at the end of the year, did I say this already? If at the end of the year, if you can look back and say that Bryce and Juwan had their best years as players, and as opposed to saying, well, they weren't quite as good as they were as juniors. I mean, that's where you got to start with those two guys. They need to have their best seasons ever. And Williams has to be the guy, in my opinion.
Yeah, you saw him at times last year, especially at the end of the year. I mean, even when they were trying to come back in the NCAA tournament game, I remember there were flashes of him. He was solid all year round, Kent. But I felt like we felt his potential as a scorer when they've talked about him as having NBA potential in flashes last year. Yeah. And they're going to need more of those.
Yeah, I was looking here on my spotting board from Sunday. I had it written down somewhere, but he averaged 23.3 points tournament games and in the game against A&M in Memphis. Mm-hmm. So he was and he was playing point guard.
Yeah.
So I just think we got a taste of what he could be this year, and I hope he becomes what he could be.
Were you surprised those guys came back? I mean, man, I was a little bit, just because it was going to be such a reshuffling of the roster and everything. And you never know how happy or if they've got better offers anywhere else. What was your reaction to when they said they were going to come back?
Well, I was happy. And as I look back on their decisions, I'm not surprised, really. First of all, I'm assuming they got taken care of. Yeah, in terms of name, image, and likeness. Otherwise, I mean, I just assume that's a given. But
sure,
if you think about how quickly those guys made, I think it had everything to do with what we were talking about earlier, which is the phenomenon of Nebraska basketball and the support and the attention they get and the love that they get. And if that had been absent, I think they'd have been gone.
Yeah. They liked it here.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's, those guys got a lot of love last year, and deservedly so. But I could have seen a scenario where, if you're playing for, I don't know, Penn State or Iowa or you name the team in the Big Ten, where, there was a good year, went to the tournament, didn't win. I mean, I just think it was special in terms of how those guys were treated and the give and take between the fans and the players. And I think that's why they're back. And I think they love Fred, playing for Fred.
Yeah, that's a great point. Coaches obviously factor largely into that. What have you? I mean, you had a chance to sit with Fred a ton, right? Talk to him a ton, especially right after games. What have you learned about him that you maybe didn't know since you've started getting closer with him? And obviously, it's been a lot of years now. But what have you learned about him as a coach?
That he's brilliant.
Right.
That he is brilliant in terms of the X's and O's, and I think and totally underrated in terms of how the culture that he created and what that means as far as the comfortability and of the players and the motivation that the players have and how they respond to critique, all of that together, plus tremendous human being. And the other thing about him that I will say that is, in my opinion, is 100% valid is he Osborne so much. in terms of that old thing about not getting too high, not getting too low, and he's so grounded, and he's a good dude. I mean, he's a good dude. So I know I wasn't really specific. I was all over the place with that answer, but that's what.
No, but I know, I mean, he's obvious. It's just been such an odd trajectory here at Nebraska for him because, those first few seasons, you remember, I mean, you were there, Kent. You remember the Alonzo Verge seasons, and then you bring Bryce in, and you've got that. Those were some painful times that it looked disorganized at times. People were frustrated, and then all of a sudden, it's like something changed. But it's so rare to have a coach in any sport really, I mean, really go several years and just not be taking those steps forward. And then all of a sudden it happens. And that seems to have happened here for whatever reason.
Well, I think, that first year he was handicapped. He got here late, kind of like Doc did when he replaced Barry Collier. That year you weren't going to get any players. It was too late to get any. So I think in the first 2-3 years, he had to take guys that were not the most desirable in two respects. Number one, they weren't as talented as you needed them to be. And number two, he made a decision. He hasn't put it in these exact words, but this is the way I describe it. He made a decision to create a culture where there was this tremendous buy-in, which you've seen on the floor. I mean, you don't play like that unless you are together and have bought in. But there were some guys I think that were in it for themselves, and you had to take guys at that stage because you couldn't get in on guys with the most talent. But I think that the thing that they decided is that number one, you need guys that. Well, he said it publicly a lot. I want to get guys that have won where they've been, winners, and I want to get guys with experience. That whole thing about being old. That's that's kind of a throwaway in terms of if you hear him talking about that, hear those guys talking about that. But that's huge. They are an old team, and they were last year too. So I think it's been it's been a progress that has had, there's been growing pains, no question about it. But I don't think he ever questioned himself at all about his ability to coach. And I don't know, we could get into the weeds on this thing about, things happening that, he had COVID show up, and that did certain things to you.
Yeah.
Director of basketball operations that was kind of in charge of recruiting, that they were after a different kind of cat. And so, he made some changes. And all the changes combined have turned out to be the right changes, I think.
Yeah, for sure. It'll be interesting the way you describe it, his priorities as a player. I mean, and this is also just the reality of college basketball, but he's obviously going to keep building with the transfer portal year after year, right? Like, and even if you're losing another in-state guy went somewhere else, right? A week or two ago, and a lot of people talking about that as well. But yeah. But he's used to building like this. He has built, but that also kind of matches the prototype that you're describing in terms of a player, right? Been somewhere already and had winning experience, have a little bit of experience. And doesn't mean it's a 1-year guy necessarily, right? I mean, look at Juwan Gary, right? He feels like he's been here forever.
Yeah. And, I think that the following is valid. There's a continuum between the worst and the best in the category of, as a coaching staff, being able to identify those things in players, all of those things in players. And they've been good at picking and choosing. I know Raleigh Wooster was like number one on the board. Now, I don't know if he was number one on the board for anybody else, but they knew what they wanted.
Yeah.
And you know what I mean?
Yeah. Like at some point, talent evaluation in this era of existing college players becomes bigger than it ever has been. And maybe that's what we saw right there with Wooster.
Yeah. So I mean, and then you lose Casey. Well, you got to get some shooters here, so they get a Sejan and they get Griffiths, and don't forget Williams can shoot it.
Yeah.
So and they realized that they needed to be better on the boards. They got some guys that they think that can help them that have certain skills in the paint. So I just have been impressed with their ability to judge what they need and then to go out and get what they need.
Last question for you here. Do you think they hit the equilibrium with scheduling this year? That was, something we talked about a bunch last year as we were going down the stretch, right? In terms of whether they were going to have enough quality non-conference wins. We talked about, the other side of it in previous years where it was just, they ended up with a 500 record because it was so tough. It really feels like you're kind of searching for this equilibrium. What do you think? And then, of course, you got the change in the Big Ten this year as well, which affects that as well. What do you think looking ahead at this schedule?
Well, I think that what you just said takes care of the whole thing. I mean, if you're in the top half of the conference, you're probably in the tournament, regardless of what your non-conference schedule produces or doesn't produce. That's my opinion.
Okay.
Now, I don't think you can be 16 and 15 probably necessarily, but if you finish in the top 8 or 9 in the league, you're going to be in the tournament.
Yeah.
Now you got to play at Creighton, you got to play St. Mary's and Sioux Falls. You got a few games in Hawaii that might could surprise you theoretically. Every year there's somebody that is in the top 25 that gets beat at home in a bye game.
Yeah.
Always.
Yep.
So,
yeah.
So there's a lot to look forward to. I just think that college basketball season is a wonderful phenomenon. It's long enough. It's a long winter, but it creates a story. It creates a narrative that people can, and it's the ups and downs, not just of what happens on the floor, but all the minutia we're talking about. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah. Well, I'll probably be up in the middle of the night around, Christmas time listening to you live from Hawaii. So, that'll be fun.
Well, think of me on Christmas Eve. I'll be by myself in a hotel room in Waikiki, unable to go to the beach because I'm preparing for a broadcast Christmas Day.
Oh, geez.
I've done that before, and it's a little depressing.
Yeah, I bet.
Now, have you ever heard anybody else complain about being in Hawaii?
About being in Hawaii, but I mean, you made an okay case. I'll be up joining you. Hopefully, they'll get the earlier slots. I think that means they lost, though, if they get the earlier slots. So,
right.
So we'll see. Should be fun. Kent, hey, just a big thank you for even doing this. I appreciate it. I've told you this before, but look up a lot to you, and I associate so many great memories in my life with you, and for that reason alone, you're super meaningful to me, and so it means a lot to just have a chance to talk to you.
Oh, it's great, Jack.
So thank you for doing that.
Likewise, I feel the same way. Now, where are your seats?
Where are my seats? They vary. Okay. I end up in some different spots. I do sometimes get some from the station that are pretty good, so I get to be kind of quasi behind you.
If the salespeople don't want them.
That's exactly how that works, Kent. I wasn't gonna break the third wall there, but yes, if you know this world, if they've got some extra, sometimes I luck out and get those, and so I get to be right behind you. But otherwise, I'm in different places.
Well, the reason I ask is, I can be kind of oblivious to people around the arena, so you got to come up and say hi when you're there, because I will. Yeah,
I will.
All right, man. Thank you.
Hey, thanks, Ken. I appreciate it. Hey, I-80 Club, thank you guys. If you're watching this on YouTube, if you want to just like and subscribe to the page, we're going to do more like this. We are going to have Caleb Henry and I are going to do a Friday morning show, 11 o'clock, Nebrasketball brunch, and we'll talk about the week coming, the weekend ahead for Nebraska basketball, and then we're going to be doing post-game shows after Nebrasketball too. So be listening for that. Subscribe to the page, hit the notifications so you can find out when they're happening. We'll get started with that for Game 1 on Monday. So that's going to be a lot of fun. So join us for those. All right. Thank you, Kent. We'll see you soon.